close your eyes for a moment, and imagine your heart in silence, not the silence of nothingness, but the silence that speaks, where something ancient inside you begins to stir. Can you hear it? That soft, forgotten whisper, and the one that says you were not meant to survive this life. You were meant to awaken through it. Because maybe, just maybe, you're not broken. You're transforming. Perhaps you're walking through one of those seasons where everything feels still and heavy, like the air doesn't move, like the days are quiet but not peaceful, where your soul feels like it's waiting for something unnamed, unseen, but deeply necessary. Maybe you've tried everything: gratitude lists, affirmations, prayers whispered into the void, and still the ache remains, the ache for meaning, the ache for something real, the ache to feel whole again. Let me tell you something that most people never say out loud. Healing is not linear. Growth doesn't always feel like light. Sometimes it feels like crumbling, like forgetting who you thought you were so you can remember who you actually are. You're not failing. You're unfolding. And in that sacred unraveling, you begin to touch something most never do. The truth beneath the surface. The soul behind the smile. The power inside the pain. You see, most people live by default, not by design. They live repeating the thoughts that were whispered to them as children. Be careful. Don't dream too big. Life is hard. Get used to it. And those voices, they sink deep, not because they're true, but because they're familiar. But you wouldn't be here if you were meant to stay there. There is a version of you that already exists on the other side of this. Stronger, softer, clearer, not because the world got easier, but because you stopped waiting for it to. Because you stopped negotiating your worth based on outside validation and started remembering your inner authority. That's what belief truly is, not hype, not hope, but memory. A remembering of what your soul knew before the noise began. You were not born afraid. You were not born doubtful. You were born curious, alive, magnetic. So what happened? Repetition, conditioning, biology responding to trauma. The world trained your nervous system to expect smallness, to anticipate pain before it arrives. Your brain began to interpret peace as suspicious and chaos as normal. But now the invitation is different. Now you're being asked not to fix yourself, but to return to yourself, not to chase light, but to become it. Because your biology listens to your beliefs. Your cells respond to your story. Your heart doesn't beat to survive, it beats to resonate with truth. This is where spiritual neuroscience begins, not in labs, but in lived experience. When a person begins to shift the internal narrative, the chemistry follows. Epigenetics has already proven what ancient mystics always knew. Your environment, especially your inner one, changes your expression. Your energy alters your genes. Your thoughts command your body. So what are you rehearsing? What identity are you repeating? Not consciously, but emotionally. Do you speak to yourself like someone you trust, or like someone you're still punishing? Because the truth is, your subconscious doesn't care about your intentions. It listens only to your rituals, the thoughts you let linger, the feelings you practice, the emotions you don't challenge. And if you keep repeating lack, guilt, and fear, they become your script, not because they're real, but because they're rehearsed. But here's the miracle. You can change the script, not by force, but by fire. The fire of decision, the quiet but unshakable act of choosing a new narrative, even when the old one still echoes. That's how you begin, not with proof, but with presence. So try this now, just once. Breathe slowly. Now say inside yourself, I am not waiting to feel worthy. I already am. I am not healing to be whole. I already am. I'm not hoping for change. I'm creating it. And yet the mind may resist. That's expected. It's not an enemy. It's a system, one that must be retrained, because the soul does not shout. It whispers. And sometimes, in the middle of the chaos, in the middle of the ache, the soul is simply asking, can you still hear me? There's a law in the quantum world that says the observer changes the observed. It's not philosophy, it's physics. The very act of looking shifts reality, not just because of attention, but because of presence, because of vibration, because of coherence between what you feel and what you focus on. So what does that mean for you? It means your inner state is not just reacting to the world, it is shaping it. It means your thoughts are not innocent passengers, they are architects, quietly building the structure of your reality, one frequency at a time. But let's slow this down, not into science, but into silence. Let's take this idea into your living room, into the mornings when you wake up and don't want to move, into the nights when the questions keep circling, but answers don't arrive. You see, the quantum field doesn't respond to what you want. It responds to who you are being. And being is not about performance, it's about resonance. What are you vibrating with? Resentment, fear, hope, faith? You may not say it aloud, but your body knows. Your breath knows. Your actions know. This is not about pretending, it's about aligning. Your soul cannot fake frequency, so if you're asking for peace but vibrating in urgency, the field listens to urgency. If you're calling for love but vibrating in unworthiness, the field mirrors that. And this isn't punishment, it's precision. Because the universe doesn't respond to your words, it responds to your coherence. And coherence begins the moment you stop abandoning yourself. The moment you say, even if no one else believes me, I do. Even if the path is uncertain, I'll walk it anyway. Even if my past tells me I'll fail, I'll still try with open hands and a full heart. This is the revolution of spirit, the rebellion of becoming, not loud, not grand, but sacred. Because in a world that profits from your doubt, loving yourself is a radical act of creation. Neville Goddard called it living in the end, feeling the reality of what you desire, not as a distant dream, but as a present truth. Not someday I'll be safe, but I already am. Not maybe love will come, but love is who I am. Can you feel the difference? One lives in hope, the other lives in being. This is not mental gymnastics. This is spiritual physics. And when you feel it in your body, when your nervous system begins to trust the new narrative, when your heart stops bracing for impact and begins to open. That's when the field shifts. That's when the reality begins to bend, because reality, as Tom Campbell says, is consciousness rendered, which means that your life is not a fixed structure, it's a feedback loop of your most practiced beliefs. But that's the gift, isn't it? If it's created from belief, it can be changed by belief. That's what Andrew Carnegie knew. That's what Florence Scovel Shinn taught. That's what you're remembering now. And if remembering feels strange at first, it should. You've spent years forgetting, years adjusting, years shrinking, years rehearsing the script of survival. But today, the rehearsal ends. Because this moment, this breath, it holds the entire frequency of transformation. And transformation is not a feeling, it's a decision repeated until it becomes biology. Let me give you an image. Imagine a river, wide, deep, flowing with certainty. Now imagine you've been swimming upstream your whole life, trying to prove, to achieve, to fix, to earn, and then one day you stop fighting. You stop struggling to be enough, and you turn around. You don't give up. You align. You let the current carry you, not toward laziness, but toward truth. That's what coherence feels like. Not passivity, not fantasy, but alignment between thought, emotion, and soul. And when your body feels that harmony, when your heart beats in agreement with your belief, you stop leaking energy. You stop living in resistance, and you begin to rise. So ask yourself now, what am I swimming against that I could surrender to? What old belief is still writing your story in ink that you haven't had the courage to erase? Because your soul is not attached to your past. Only your ego is. Your soul cares about resonance, about truth, about presence. It doesn't need the past to explain the future. It only needs you to come home. So here's a quiet practice, not to change your life overnight, but to change your signal. Each morning, before the world speaks, place your hand over your heart. Breathe in slowly and ask, what frequency do I want to carry today? Then listen, not with your mind, but with your body. And whatever word arises, peace, courage, forgiveness, breathe it in. Imagine your cells receiving it. Let it become your tone, your rhythm, your vibration. Then walk into your day from that place, not to impress, not to prove, but to align. Because the version of you who lives in peace, who creates from ease, who loves without armor, already exists. She's not far away, he's not unreachable. They are simply waiting for you to tune in to the frequency of your true self. And maybe today is that tuning fork. Maybe this moment right here is not information, it's an invitation to remember who you are, to stop seeking and start resonating, to stop rehearsing pain and start embodying power. Not the kind of power that shouts, the kind that stands in silence and does not move. Because when you return to alignment, life stops feeling like something to chase and starts feeling like something sacred to meet. There's a quiet truth that lives beneath all the noise. Your soul already knows the way. It always has. But we've been trained to doubt the quiet, to overlook the subtle, to mistrust anything that can't be measured or explained. So we fill the silence with answers that don't satisfy. We numb the ache with distractions that don't heal, and we wonder why peace still feels far away. But what if peace isn't something you find? What if it's something you stop resisting? You see, peace isn't the absence of problems. It's the presence of alignment. And alignment isn't something you earn. It's something you allow. It happens in the moments when you choose to stay with yourself, when you breathe through the discomfort instead of abandoning it, when you stop asking the world to prove your worth and begin to remember the worth that's always been there. That's not wishful thinking. That's sacred neuroscience. When you choose coherence, when your heart and mind enter into agreement, the electromagnetic field around your body shifts. The energy you carry becomes magnetic, not because of force, but because of harmony. Greg Braden calls it the language of the divine matrix, the felt coherence between the heart and the brain, a kind of internal prayer, not spoken, but lived. So I ask you now, what prayer are you living? Not the one you recite when things feel hard, but the one your life is already echoing. Is it a prayer of trust or one of fear? A prayer of expansion or of retreat? You don't need to answer aloud. Your actions have already answered. And that's not a judgment, it's an awakening. Because the moment you notice the disconnect, you've already begun to return. The moment you feel the misalignment, you've already stepped into awareness. And awareness is the beginning of freedom. So now we move from awareness to intention. Let's sit with the truth. You don't need to fix yourself. You need to listen to yourself. The symptoms in your body, the emotional waves, the patterns you keep repeating. None of them are here to shame you. They're signals, invitations, requests from your soul. What if your anxiety isn't an enemy, but a guide? What if your fatigue isn't failure, but a sacred boundary? What if your sadness is not weakness, but memory, your body remembering what it was never meant to carry? When you begin to listen like that, something opens, not in your head, but in your heart. You stop treating yourself like a project and start meeting yourself like a temple. You begin to understand every healing begins with accepting what hurts. And the moment you do that, really do it, you create space for softness, for possibility, for light to enter. So let me give you something now, a gentle daily ritual every night before you sleep. Place one hand on your heart, the other on your belly, and whisper this: I am not alone. I am not broken. I am not behind. I am exactly where I need to be for something sacred to begin. Then breathe, slowly, deeply, until your nervous system begins to settle, until your body begins to believe you again. Because here's what most never understand. Your body listens to everything your soul whispers. And if your soul is whispering, you're safe, but your habits are screaming, you're not enough, the body gets confused. That confusion, it feels like anxiety, like exhaustion, like emptiness. But the moment your actions begin to match your inner knowing, the healing begins. It may not be loud, it may not be immediate, but it will be real. Because reality always follows frequency. That's not just spiritual language, that's how coherence works. And when you begin to live from coherence, not survival, the world begins to mirror your inner state. You stop fighting for scraps. You start preparing for abundance. You stop chasing validation. You start radiating presence. And presence, my friend, is the most powerful force on earth, because presence doesn't seek to impress. It just is. Think of the great ones, not just in power, but in energy. Those whose words could quiet a room, those whose stillness felt stronger than noise. They weren't loud because they didn't need to be. They had remembered something most forget, that your true authority comes not from how much you know, but from how deeply you've integrated what you feel. So let this be your invitation back to presence, not perfection. Presence. To stop outsourcing your truth to timelines and trends. To stop waiting for the world to make you feel safe, and instead to become your own sanctuary, because your peace is not found out there. It's felt in here, right now, in this breath, in this remembering. And that remembering, that's the real work, not adding more, but shedding what was never yours to carry. Doubt, guilt, the shame that came from someone else's story. You're not here to repeat those patterns. You're here to rewrite them, and you don't need permission, only practice. There comes a moment, quiet, often unnoticed, when you realize the healing has already begun. Not because everything is fixed, but because something inside you no longer flinches. You begin to breathe differently, speak more softly to yourself, choose thoughts that don't bruise your spirit. You start to feel it in small ways, like light coming through a crack. The ache softens, the tension eases. The future no longer feels like a threat, and you understand this is what becoming whole feels like. It's not a destination, it's not a breakthrough, it's a return to the self you were before the world convinced you otherwise, before you believed you had to earn your worth, before the disappointments dulled your trust, before your joy became conditional. And that return, it begins not with force, but with stillness. Because wholeness does not arrive when you've finally done enough. It arrives when you remember you've always been enough, not because of what you have survived, not because of what you've built, but because of what you are. A soul, a frequency, a conscious breath in a sacred body, a being encoded with divinity. And no failure, no trauma, no delay can erase that. This is the wisdom ancient traditions carried long before we had names for things like epigenetics or coherence. They understood that healing is not something we chase, it's something we awaken. That the temple is not a place outside of you. It's your breath, your body, your awareness, and that when you bring presence to your pain, you transform it into power. You no longer need to shout to be heard. You no longer need to run to feel progress. You no longer need to prove to feel deserving. because you've come home. This home, it's not made of answers. It's made of allowance. The kind that says, I don't need to understand everything to trust something. I don't need the whole map to take the next step. I don't need the outcome to be guaranteed to walk in faith. This is where true alignment lives, in the sacred now, in the choice to believe, even when the world hasn't caught up yet. Because the quantum field responds not to desperation, but to devotion. And devotion is quiet, devotion is steady, devotion says, I will keep walking, even if the path isn't lit, because something in me knows the way. That's not fantasy, that's spiritual maturity. That's the kind of belief that changes lives, the kind that turns grief into gardens, that makes suffering a sacred right, that whispers to the past, thank you for your lessons, but you no longer lead here. So what now? Now you begin, not as someone who needs to become, but as someone who has remembered. You begin to move, not in fear, but in clarity. You begin to speak, not in reaction, but in resonance. You begin to create, not to escape your pain, but to give it a voice, a rhythm, a new shape. This is how alchemy works. You don't run from what was, you sit with it until it softens. You hold it with reverence, and when the time is right, you let it go with gratitude. Because your healing was never about erasing the scars. It was about finding the story they were meant to tell. And that story, it's sacred, it's true, it's needed. So now, here's the closing invitation, not to do more, but to remember deeper. Each morning, as you rise, say to yourself, I am a living prayer. I am the breath of the divine in human form. My life is not late. My healing is not wrong. My being is not small. I walk in truth. I walk in love. I walk in now. Say it not once, but until your body believes it, until your breath slows, until your shoulders relax, until your eyes see differently, because you were never meant to just survive this life. You were meant to embody it, to sanctify it, to remember that even in the dark, you are light. Even in the chaos, you are clarity. Even in the ache, you are becoming. So walk not to reach something, but to reveal something. The version of you that doesn't need to arrive because they've already awakened. Right here, right now, in the sacred, breathing, beautiful now. If this message touched something in you, even just a little, help us share this frequency. Subscribe to our channel and send this video to someone who matters to you, because no one awakens alone. And the light you found here might be the light someone else has been waiting for. Thank you.